Now to that federal judge's ruling in Texas that has legislators here in the Bay State moving to protect abortion rights in Massachusetts. And Western Mass News reporter Paris Dunford has reaction from both sides of the argument.
A federal judge in Texas ruled to halt the U.S. Food and Drug Administration's approval from 20 years ago of a medication called mifepristone. This pill is widely used across the nation in conjunction with another medication to terminate pregnancy. On Monday, Governor Maura Healey expressed her anger with his ruling and her decision to issue an executive order that would protect providers and patients when receiving an abortion by this medication.
Mifepristone has been a safe and effective FDA-approved medication for over 20 years. For over 20 years. Think about that. It's the gold standard in medication abortion care.
The ruling is paused until Friday, allowing the government to appeal, which both the Biden administration and the Justice Department have done. Western Mass News spoke with Carolee McGrath from the diocese of Springfield for their reaction to the judge's ruling.
We really believe that it's a human rights issue, and we really believe that women deserve better than abortion. And of course, those babies, we should all be on the same page about, should be welcomed and nurtured and loved.
While pro-life supporters were pleased with the federal judge's ruling, there are some organizations like Planned Parenthood who are worried that his decision could have further unintended consequences. Planned Parenthood League of Massachusetts releasing this statement, quote, eliminating mifepristone, a medication with a 99% safety rate, from the market will severely compromise abortion access, will force healthcare providers to offer medication for abortion and for miscarriage management that is both less effective and with more severe side effects, and will limit patients' ability to choose the method of care that is best for them. Governor Healey shares concerns about the other uses for this drug as well.
It's been used safely for decades as well for miscarriage management, to treat lupus, to reduce the risk of ulcers, among many other medical uses.
Because of the appeals made and another judge's ruling that protects access to this drug, legislators believe the matter will ultimately be decided by the U.S. Supreme Court. Reporting for Western Mass News, I'm Paris Dunford.